and got to work. I pulled it back as far as it would go and pulled it some more. I pulled it till I couldn't bear the pain anymore. I did this over and over again for around 3 hours until I somehow managed to pull it almost to where it was almost over the entirety of the head of my Johnson. I got way too excited, and despite the pain I gave it one big yank. And I felt the foreskin pop over the back of the glands. It hurt like hell, but I was just so relieved that I didn't care. I opened my eyes, and my heart skipped several beats. The entire lower half of the head of my penis down to the area behind it was caked with thick brown, green smegma. That was now mixing with the blood. That was now seeping out of where I tore the top part of my foreskin. When I yanked it over the glands, I freaked and squeezed the area to stop the bleeding, and that only made the pain worse. It eventually stopped, and then I had to chip away at the smegma caked onto my Johnson. I eventually got it all off after half an hour of scrubbing. I was still hurting, but I was finally done. I got the foreskin all the way back over the head of my Johnson. I thought that was it. I tried rolling it back over the head, but it wouldn't budge, so I just left it. I completely ignored the fact that forcing the foreskin back all the way would constrict all the blood flow to the head of my Johnson. You know how a balloon looks when you fill it with water and tie it? That's how my Johnson looked. I went to bed, went to school the next day in severe pain, and acted like everything was fine. When I got home I was still in major pain. So I decided I'd check on it. I undressed in the shower and looked down at it. The first thing I saw were the blisters, 2 huge brown pus-filled blisters. One on the right side and the other on the underside of the glands. The next thing I noticed was the fact that my Johnson was now seemingly turning some shade of white. I'm a black guy. I realized that if I didn't find a way to get my foreskin back over my glands, then it was probably going to shrivel up and fall off. I lubed up once more and began forcing my foreskin back over the glands. This was made even more difficult because of the 2 big blisters in the way. I kept trying to force it back over, and I put too much pressure on one of the blisters, and it broke, causing pus to leak out all over my Johnson and fingers. My Johnson was on fire at this point, and I was holding back tears, but I kept pushing until I felt it pop back over the glands, judging from the liquid that seeped out afterwards and the extra jolt of pain. I guess the second blister popped too. Once again, I left it and fucking went to bed. I checked 3 days later, and my penis went back to its original color. I rolled back the foreskin again and cleaned where the blisters were, and within 3 weeks, I was pretty much okay. My foreskin was still tight, and I do think constricting my glands with the opening of my foreskin for a whole day probably made me lose a tiny bit of sensation down there, but hey, at least my Johnson is clean. Also, please, for the love of God, teach your kids about their body. Even if they are too stupid as I was, don't take that risk, lol.